The old model of doing business in this country was very much fixed. That has all been upended in the past 5 years.
His research has been featured in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal for decoding the hidden forces quietly reshaping our communities, businesses, and daily lives. He has advised national governments and is the author of The Super Age, along with his forthcoming book, The Geography of Prosperity. We have the brilliant Bradley Schurman on the show.
We have never lived through something like this before. None of us. There is no place in the world where the birth rate isn't decreasing. That's the thing that's crazy. We still have time to adapt to it, but our runway has changed dramatically. The last time Americans experienced this level of change was actually about 100 years ago. There were huge changes in technology, communications, geopolitics, the economy. We are doing all of that on a compressed timeline right now.
What's the pain period, do you think? Is there a number of years you think it's going to be?
I say we probably have at least.
We've had a lot of new listeners recently, which is super exciting. If you're one of them, welcome and thank you. Every week, we're bringing you the guests and the conversations that enable you to become the most extraordinary version of yourself. If that's what you're here for, I have a small favor to ask. If you could look down at your device right now and tap the follow button to follow the show, that'll make sure you never miss an episode. And that way we stay connected on this platform as well. It only takes a second. It's completely free to do. And it really helps a small team like ours reach the people who are also committed to performing at their best. Thank you so much. Now let's get into today's episode.
Bradley, you recently released an index called The Geography of Prosperity here in the US. For those listening, what is it and why is it important?
Well, let me give you a little background on it first. My first book came out in 2022, just after the pandemic. And it's called The Super Age. It's about our demographic future. And it allowed me to travel across the country. And as I was traveling across America, I kept hearing the same things, that the fundamentals had changed within our cities. But local leaders, whether they be in the public or private sector, didn't really have data sets to make sense of the change that had happened. They were still very focused on economics, which is very important. You know, you want to know how many people are employed, the number of new housing starts, et cetera. But what they didn't have was an understanding of the structural forces that were bearing down on their cities. These are things like population change, climate change and extreme weather, automation and artificial intelligence, and whether or not we're really holding ourselves together with social cohesion. So the genesis for this actually happened here in Austin last year when a local leader from county government came up to me after I just presented on climate migration. And she asked me, you know, I look around here in Austin, I see the skyline and I say to myself, my God, we're doing great, but I know we're not in some areas. So we built this index, myself and James Cloninger, to help understand what cities were doing right and wrong. It's 5 dimensions, 250 metropolitan areas in the United States. And it's a ranking, not a rah-rah of which cities are doing great or a condemnation of which cities are doing poorly. It's really a diagnostic tool for these local areas to understand where they're strong, where they're weak, and where they can improve.
Mm-hmm. So 2022, it occurred, people noticing that things are changing. It sounds like things have changed for a long period of time, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
not just during COVID.
No,
right?
I mean, but COVID's a really interesting inflection point in all of our lives because I think it forced us to recalibrate, re-understand the nature of work, with more people going into remote and hybrid work, the nature of place, you know, was our home or homes working for us anymore? And the nature of cities themselves. You know, as people left the cities, specifically businesses could no longer get people to come into the office full time, we started really rethinking whether cities were working or not, functionally. I live in DC, and we have a terrible issue with occupancy for commercial space. And of course, the federal government is shedding office space now too. So it's a double-edged sword that's hitting the city right now. But we're also relatively agile, and we don't have the same skyscraper infrastructure that you have here in Austin. What we can do in DC is convert those buildings very quickly if the regulatory environment allows for it.
Into residential.
Yeah. And DC and New York City actually lead the nation in conversions right now. DC is the biggest per capita, and New York is the biggest by number. It can be done, but these are the decisions local leaders have to contend with on a regular basis, because that code, that structural stuff that sits on them, is antiquated. It's built for a different world. So this approach, this index, gives them a better sense of what's coming. It's foundational about the future, not economic, which is lagging in the past.
If you're going to convert from, say, commercial to residential, for example, there has to be like a long-term vision with that, not just to go, all right, let's convert it. And then, you know what, let's convert it back, right?
Yeah. And there has to be the right kind of perfect world. It's like a Goldilocks space for conversion to happen. The building has to work. Like, not all buildings can convert. Not all buildings have windows that open, for example. This is a big issue with, of course, skyscrapers. But you also have the right tax financing in place too. So a city government that's willing to help support this type of conversion. And then you have to have the general will of the people that are living within that city, because you are in fact going to have to change regulatory code, converting commercial districts into residential or mixed use ones. And that's a lot harder than people realize, because we have a participatory government system in this country, and democracy at its core is a very messy way of governing. It's not perfect by any measure, but as Franklin said, it's the best one we have, effectively. Winston Churchill, my apologies, it's the best one we have. This gives local leaders, whether they be in the private or public sector, a very long-term understanding of what's coming, so they can make the right decisions today. Populations don't just explode overnight. They explode over years.
Yeah.
That's happened here in Austin, where the population has grown exponentially over the past 10 years. There is opportunity to adjust. We wanted to give them a tool that helps them adjust.
And helps them adjust with data.
And with foresight.
Foresight.
And with foresight. Foresight is one of the least understood practices that is out there. People think that if you do foresight, you're looking into a crystal ball and you magically see the future. That is not the case. Foresight is giving you multiple pathways to the future, with multiple different outcomes, with higher probabilities assigned to one than to others. But foresight is essential for planning for the future. You take some certain assumptions into play. The old model of doing business in this country was very much fixed. We kind of knew where populations were flowing. We kind of had a sense which cities and regions were growing. We kind of had a real comfort with the weather patterns and insurance rates. That has all been upended in the past 5 years. You go into South Florida now, where Citadel, it's just announced in the past year or two that it's moving its headquarters from Chicago to Miami. Miami is under incredible strain right now in terms of shifts with its population, in terms of its climate risk. And I have to say, folks, I don't care what your position is on the climate, whether you think we've done it or not, whether you think it is real or not, the insurance companies believe in it. And in places like South Florida, along the Gulf Coast and the fire-prone regions, you're seeing insurance rates go up 30 to 40% a year now.
A year.
Wow. So that's a compounding effect. And folks may say to themselves, I'm fine. I can take on that burden, that extra 30 or 40%. That's great. But can your neighbor? And what about the business down the street? Can they absorb that shock? And what is your city or your state government doing to help people navigate this, if anything? And one of the findings from the report is that 6 of the 10 bottom cities are in Florida. They are in what is known as the retirement corridor. And the bottom city is the villages, because they're compounding on multiple problem areas. Low population renewal, because it's a place where seniors live. Tourist economy, highly disruptible by automation and artificial intelligence. And many of these places exist in climate risk or weather risk zones, which the insurance companies have already said, we're not insuring that like we did before. So there's greater risk there. But if a city has good governance and you have good leaders that can kind of see where these shifts are happening, you can weather most of the storm. The problem is they don't have great governance in Florida either. So the risk is compounding, and it's compounding very quickly there. The same goes for Louisiana. New Orleans has the same exact problems. California, where many of the wildfires are happening, is bad, but it's not the worst because governance still exists there. The government is still actively involved in making sure that people are able to keep their properties as much as they can, and insurance companies don't basically push people out of their homes if the next crisis happens.
Let's talk then about the key areas. So are there 5?
There are 5.
5 key.
So the first,
and what are they? Why those 5? Yeah. And then why not some of the other measurements that could have been in there, for example?
Yeah, let's talk about the first one. It's population renewal. My background's in demographics. I study people more than anything else. And population renewal is something that we've never had to consider before.
So what is that for those listening?
Top line is, are we having enough babies?
Yeah.
And are there enough immigrants? That's it.
Yeah.
Well, we're not having enough babies.
Yeah. And that's nationwide. And that's most of the Western world, right?
It's actually most of the world now.
Most of the world, yeah. Aside from Africa.
In the West, in particular, in East Asia, the birth rate has been below replacement rates, which is about 2 babies per woman over the course of their lifetime for decades. But there is no place in the world where the birth rate isn't decreasing. That's the thing that's crazy. So even in sub-Saharan Africa, where women are having on average 6 or 7 babies, 5 years ago, they might have been having 8 or 9. Mm. So even that's changed there. But in the United States, when we had a lot of babies, we obviously had a big population that could fill jobs, fill houses, be consumers, et cetera, et cetera. We were able to fill that gap with immigration for a very long time, and we were very good at it. But immigration became a political issue. And if I say one thing about the president, it's this: he's been very effective at shutting off immigration in this country. And that comes with costs. It may come with opportunities too, but the costs are very clear. And when you shut that off, you have immediate contractions to the labor supply, you have immediate contractions to consumption, and the population of the country writ large, and this is where it gets really interesting, goes from being on a trajectory of growth for the next 50, 60, 70 years to one where a plateau and contraction might happen in the next 10. We still have time to adapt to it, but our runway has changed dramatically. So we're looking at births, immigration, and we're also looking at the age mix of the population. Because you may have a large population within your community, but if a third of them or more are retired and not working, that becomes a drag on the local economy, a huge drag on the local economy. So do you have the right mix? So that's population renewal. The second is climate and extreme weather preparedness. Is your city in a flood zone? Is your city in a fire zone? Basically looking at FEMA maps and the like. But more importantly, is your city doing anything about it? Is your leadership doing anything about it? Because you can live in a climate zone that's problematic and your leadership does nothing, and you're far worse off than living in a place like New York City that gets flooded, where leadership is actually focused on solving for the problems. Or in DC, where they're building new seawalls on the Potomac River to keep the tides at bay. If you have that kind of leadership in place, a city is far more resilient. The third is social cohesion. Are we getting along? Is there high levels of volunteering, high levels of giving, philanthropic giving? Is the community really kind of rowing in the same direction? And we can measure that. Is it perfect? No measure is, but we get really close. The fourth is automation. No one's really measuring this yet. We're measuring the impacts not only of having automation, but whether or not your community has the right infrastructure to navigate it and whether or not its industries are highly disruptible.
How have you gone about measuring that then if there's not the measurements in place right now?
Well, because it hasn't been looked at this holistically. Everything that we've looked at thus far, people are looking at in silos.
Yep.
So they're looking at, okay, well, Austin, Texas has great STEM talent. This city's really going to be able to adapt to automation well. And that's true. Its score is relatively high. But you might take a look at a city like Chattanooga, for example, and you might say, Chattanooga doesn't have any of the attributes like an Austin or a Seattle or a Bay Area city. They're definitely going to fall behind. Not so fast. Because in a place like Chattanooga, they treat broadband as a public good. So in a place like Chattanooga, the children that were raised there have far higher digital literacy across all economic groups than most any other place in the country. So that makes them highly resilient. Also, if you're living in a knowledge city, and a knowledge city is where the different layers of the educational ecosystem are working together, not against each other. So you could live in a university town that has no connection to the city itself. They call it town and gown. But if you live in a city with a layered educational system, the library works with the elementary and the secondary schools. You've got great trade schools, you've got great technical schools, and you've got those universities and research institutions. If you have those in place, it allows the city to pivot a lot faster if a disruption happens. Case in point, my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which was knocked down in the late 1970s and 80s because of the collapse of the steel industry. Pittsburgh was able to pivot over a 20 or 30-year time and fully remake its economy to one of eds, meds, and tech instead of industry. That's because of their layered ecosystem, because they have that knowledge system in place. You just go, a couple hours west to Detroit or South Bend. Those cities got the wind knocked out of them, and it took them twice as long to recover because they didn't have that layered ecosystem in place. So that's how we're measuring it. And it is a unique measure, and people are surprised by it. But we have to look at new ways of measuring things in order to see what the future is going to be, because this is a novel time. We have never lived through something like this before. None of us. The last time Americans experienced this level of change was actually about 100 years ago in the period between the two wars, where there were huge changes in technology, communications, geopolitics, trade, the economy. Of course, there was a pandemic then too. We are doing all of that on a compressed timeline right now. So we have to look at alternative ways of measuring and judging in order to get to a result that is novel as well.
Well, and it's only going to continue speeding up as well. That's the crazy
that's the
thing, right?
And
It's like we haven't even begun to see the
that's
level of change.
That's bothersome is that I feel in many ways so many of our leaders are like deer in the headlights right now. And people are visibly stressed in this country right now. You can tell they're visibly stressed because all of the information they're getting really is following the old script, not the new script. And most of the information that they're getting, whether that be on traditional media or social media, is not designed to inform. The vast majority of media is not designed to inform. The vast majority of media leans into the old adage, if it bleeds, it leads. If you can outrage, if you can freak people out, you're more likely to get them to pay money and pay attention to you. So we don't have that kind of infrastructure in place that's really grounded in knowledge and thought and taking the time to really assess an issue and live with the uncomfortable truth that there's not always right and wrong. Oftentimes things, big decisions, big problems sit in the gray. And being able to live with two truths is one of the great powers right now of not just falling into either or side of the argument and then doubling down on that fight when in reality, the truth is somewhere in the middle.
So then how did you go about the actual data itself and how did you go about bringing that together? What were the data sets that you utilized?
Well, before we get there, the last one is governance and foresight.
Oh, please, yeah.
And that's a big one because we want to know if the government that you live in, work in, have your business in is working for you or against you. And you'd be surprised. There are some really great governments that sit out there, and there are some really poor ones. There is a direct correlation, I actually think it's causal now, between the size of the city and how good the government is. So New York City comes out at the very top of the index, which really surprised us. We thought it would fall lower. New York does really well in social cohesion, so that helped lift up their score. They've got great influx of new people. Because there are so many different cultures that live there, folks are kind of forced to get along. And because they live in such a tight area, people are kind of forced to get along. But where New York really fails is on its government. And this is no repudiation of Mamdani or the previous Mayor Adams or the previous mayor before him. It's simply because large city governments are unruly beasts. the closer you get to the people, the smaller the government is, the more likely it's responsive to the people's needs. The more likely it's responsive to businesses' needs, the more likely people and the government are rowing together, and the business community. So I was in South Bend, Indiana, just a few weeks ago, and I was sitting down for lunch with Mayor Mueller and one of the local business owners, a guy who owns a restaurant called L Street Cafe. And over lunch, I said to the guy, I said, what do you think works best about this place, to the owner? And he said, in South Bend, the government can't hide. They have to be responsive to me. So I can go find my city councilman. I can go find Mayor Mueller on the street and talk to him. You can't get within 20 feet of Mayor Mamdani in New York. And that's for good reason, too. Yeah. But different sized places have different responses as a result. Some of the smaller cities do the best in that regard.
What are some of those smaller cities that did well?
The one that blew us all away, I mean, we're still scratching our heads on this, is Frederick, Maryland. Okay. It's a city that most people have never heard of before.
Yeah, for those listening, fill us in on the city. How big is it? And what are some of the attributes?
It's just north of Washington, D.C. It's about an hour, I think, outside of the city. It sits in this just very unique space between a very rural landscape and the big cities, quote unquote, big cities, Baltimore, Washington, and Pittsburgh. That's kind of where it sits squarely. And of course, Charleston, West Virginia. Now, Frederick's attributes are imparted around governments. Like, their governance scores through the roof, but they also have really good education system there as well. And for some reason, with our metrics, it just works better than other places. Now, this project is the backbone of a book that I'm writing called The Geography of Prosperity, a New Map of the American Dream. The data from this index tells us one thing, but the stories locally tell us something very different. They give color to the picture of what's actually happening and give us a better sense of what's actually working on the ground. And I have not been physically to Frederick yet. That's coming in the next month.
I was going to say, you got to get out there, right?
I got to get there. I got to get a car and I got to drive up to Frederick and see what's actually working.
Yeah.
But another city that did incredibly well is Durham. Yeah. I actually was corresponding with the mayor yesterday. Once he found out, he's thrilled. I'll be going down there in a couple of weeks to spend time with him, city council, local business leaders, et cetera. But it's working in some places. Ann Arbor, Michigan did incredibly well. University towns don't always do well because they don't have that connective tissue between the academic center and the civic center. But they've been working on getting that right. So no more town and gown in a place like that, more of a holistic connection between the two places.
Have you noticed any correlation within those 5 key areas with these top cities? Are there any that, show that, okay, these are like 3 of the most important, for example, or are they all different for different reasons?
They're different for different reasons, and they're different for different regions, and they're different for different size cities. Yeah. We made a very conscious decision to do 250, A, because it's a large sample, B, because it's America's 250th birthday and it's good marketing. Yeah. But because of that, we get a great diversity of cities in the mix. We think that the ones that will perform best long-term don't necessarily have the top score in any one particular category. We think they're the ones that are most balanced across the 5 different metrics because there's less of an opportunity for one thing to pull in one direction or another. But no city's perfect. That is the biggest takeaway from this. Every city can improve. And every city has to be looking at risk differently today than they did even just 5 years ago. So what's a risk for a city like Raleigh that has a great educational system, great governance, a great social cohesion? Well, it's really the same as here in Austin, that it's growing very fast. That region is growing very fast. And if a region grows too fast, I think you found this here in Austin, is that social cohesion starts to fray. Like Austin used to be weird. Now Austin is tech. You can find weird pockets here, but that kind of culture of Austin is really slipped away. Is that a bad thing or a good thing? I'm not going to make that judgment call. That's up for the locals to decide. But it is a very different place than it was just 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. If a place grows too fast too, government has a harder time responding with services and supports to the new population that's there.
Infrastructure as well. I mean, the
Yeah,
roads
well,
here,
that's the whole part of government.
There's a huge amount from a road standpoint, and infrastructure is being built out right now, and it's been happening for a while now. We've been here for about 3 years, and there's a bunch of stuff that hasn't caught up yet, if you will.
And in a city like Austin, you have the added benefit of being the capital as well. So because many of these road projects are funded by the state government is seeing the problems in real time.
Yeah.
However, you go across state to a place like Brownsville, which has incredible growth right now, insane growth. They have none of that in place.
Yeah.
Absolutely none of it. So even though a place like Brownsville comes up really high in the index for growth and population, and it's exciting because it's young and it's new and everything's being built is fast and cool, and it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And that kind of growth, those boom towns, can crack under their own pressure if it's not managed.
So let's have a think about and a conversation about then maybe some different segments of folks. Like if we go maybe the individual, and how do they go about thinking about this, and probably where are they going to live would be a good way of putting that. Then you've got maybe where am I going to work would be a second one. A third one being if somebody has a company, then okay, where am I actually going to go and have the headquarters or an office, for example? Where are we going to expand to? And then maybe we touch on from a government standpoint as well. Let's start the individual first. How could somebody be utilizing what you've released and the stuff that's coming to think about their own lives?
Yeah, I think first of all you have to realize it's a diagnostic tool. It's not a prescriptive tool.
Yeah.
So if you're taking a look at this and you're looking at your city, your region, your metropolitan area, it gives you a sense of what's working and what's not. To even tap into that, you have to have high agency. You have to be curious, and you have to want to know what's going on in the place in which you live to make a decision. A woman asked me yesterday, Brad, I'm approaching retirement and I want to know where to live in retirement. How can I use this to make my decision about where to move? And I said, this is one tool in your toolbox. It is not your only tool. It will give you a sense of which cities are future ready on the whole, but it won't necessarily give you a sense of which cities are best prepared for retirees. And she's, oh, okay, what other tools are there? And I was able to rattle off half a dozen that she could use. But all of this decision-making is highly complex. And the people who are more likely to do it are people who are higher income, higher education level. It's not dismissing the people that aren't. It's just that there's a lot more agency with people that have those kind of resources.
Well, they have choices. They have choices. They're free to choose, yeah.
And I think that, if you're an individual, I say this about the coast all the time. I think the coastal areas are a dystopia ready to happen because they are so perfectly idyllic now. And so many people aspire to move to a coastal area. It's a dream for retirees. But what we are seeing in places like South Florida is that there is a migration happening away from the coastal cities. It's small, but it's measurable. But guess who's moving? It's the people who have money. It's the people that have license to move. It's the people that are working age. Who are they leaving behind? They're leaving behind people who are in fixed incomes or low income. What does that do to local business? Kills it. What does it do to local government? Strains it beyond belief. So these places now have an extra burden to carry, if we want to call it that. They have more responsibility and less ways to fund their responsibility. So it erodes very quickly. That's something that individuals need to watch for. I think for individuals, it's your own stress level for risk. My husband and I were adamant on buying a place in South Beach immediately after COVID. It was the one place we could all go and kind of not wear a mask and kind of lay back. COVID never happened in Florida, by the way. Never happened there. And they believe it. And that's fine. But it was a paradise during those COVID years. We knew where we wanted to live. We kind of knew what our budget was. And then I watched for 3-4 years now, well, almost 5 now, the compounding of the insurance costs on the condo market, the compounding of insurance costs on the property market in general. And I'm watching some of these older buildings that had the added burden after the Surfside collapse of new regulatory frameworks that required them to keep more money in the property, required better governance. And some of these older buildings, people bought a condo for $200,000 10 years ago. Some of them have a $200,000 underlying mortgage now on top of that just to pay for building maintenance. So it's not sustainable. I cannot assume that risk. I will not assume that risk. Somebody else might say, I'm good. I'll do it. I'll do it.
And I think that's what's important about, okay, you've got this, as you mentioned, a diagnostic tool. There are other tools out there as well. From an individual standpoint, is getting really clear on what it is that you want to experience.
What do you want?
Like, what do you want? And how do you, and yeah, from a financial standpoint, but also a lifestyle standpoint, and these other areas to be able to then determine, okay, which of these are most important, and maybe even ranking them as those pieces, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think we live in the golden age of information, but even in the golden age of information, there's a lot of bad information out there. We aspired to build a tool, and a tool that people could use, and a tool that wasn't prescriptive. We don't say you have to do X and you have to do Y to get to this outcome. We say that this is a tool you can use to chart your own adventure. And I say to folks all the time, what do you want to be when you grow up? That's the same in life when making decisions. What do you want to be in the next 5 years? Where do you want to be in the next 5 years? What are the attributes of the community in which you live? One of the questions I get all the time about this index and about my forthcoming book is, would you move to any of these cities that scored well, especially the smaller ones? And I don't know if people love my response, but DC is my home now. And I moved there in large part out of necessity. There wasn't a ton in Pittsburgh for me 30 years ago when I left for college. There just wasn't a lot there. And there wasn't a lot there 25 years ago when I graduated with my master's degree. Where opportunity existed and prosperity existed 25 years ago was in the big cities. That math has changed. Big cities are wildly expensive right now. They're not really designed for family creation. They're not designed for home ownership. They are designed for a world where cities basically sucked in talent from all across the country and all around the world, used it as much as they could, and kind of spit it out. They built their infrastructure according to that plan. That's where you find in the big cities right now, these micro units, how ridiculous these places are. They're basically a hotel room that people stay in, that live in full time. You can't have a family in that kind of space. You can't do it. I met a guy in South Bend that blew me away. 30 years old, went to Notre Dame, graduated, decided to stay in South Bend because he liked it so much, which kind of made me chuckle because I went to South Bend 30 years ago to look at colleges and I thought I would never come to this place again. And he now works for the mayor. So he's on a city government salary. At 27, he was married, had a kid, and owned a home. The average American does not buy their first home until 40 now. He is living the American dream because his calculation on prosperity and what it means for him exists in a place like South Bend. It's not going to New York City and barely being able to make rent on a $200,000 salary or $300,000 salary. His idea of prosperity is starting young, building wealth younger, and being able to attain things on a lower salary than he would in the private sector. That's what it means for him.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own math on what they think prosperity is.
What's your version of prosperity? And is there a time or a place where it would mean, all right, you know what? DC's not home anymore.
Yeah. I mean, you have to measure every city. I think I think it's like a sailing analogy. Like, you kind of know where you want to go, but if you're sailing, it's never a straight path. It is never a straight path. You have to pivot. You have to tack your sails with the wind and the waves. It is never a straight sail. And I've gone through times, even in the past years, where I'm like, I'm not sure if DC is the right place for me, but I love it. I love it there. My support network's there. My friends are there. My family's not too far away in Pittsburgh. What we need in our family is less about the structural things of a place and more about the systems that exist. So, like,
in what way?
I need transportation.
Yep.
I need transportation. I am one of, 40% of my community that doesn't own a car. So I like taking public transportation. I like living in a walkable community where I can access 99% of what I need within 15 minutes on foot from my front door. I love that. But I also realized that I live in a townhome. This gets very kind of micro here. I lived in a townhome that was designed in 1895, and that townhome will not adapt to my lifestyle as I get older. It simply won't. It can't. It's 18 feet wide. There's only so much you can do with it. Getting an elevator into a property like that, nearly impossible. Doing first floor living on a property where it's basically a shotgun design, you go from room to room, not down a hallway, also very hard. So I know at some point we're going to have to move. The question will probably be as we approach that, which could be, 20 years from now, maybe, from a needs perspective, do we stay and move into a condo, or do we leave altogether and find a place that's better suited for maybe that retirement stage of our life? You have to constantly be assessing your place. And if you have more resources as an individual, you obviously have a lot more license and a lot more ability to make those choices. But for those people who don't, and there are plenty of them out there that struggle with their finances, maybe feel like they're stuck in their community, this offers the diagnostic for them to know what needs to be fixed or what they should approach fixing. The book will offer more prescriptions to see what's working and where and why these are interesting and unique approaches to making cities better. Some of them are high cost, but the vast majority of them are low cost interventions. Very, very low cost, very, very achievable. One of the things I put a lot of pride in with this work is that we're not looking at the cities that are flush with cash all the time. We're looking at the cities that have constrained resources, because some of the best innovation happens where there are constrained resources, and you have to force yourself to think differently about the problem, approach it differently. In Memphis, where I spent time about 8 weeks ago, their library system is helping people with their vocations turn them into paying gigs, paying jobs. They actually have people called innovator in residence in the library system. So for free, you can go there and learn how to be a podcaster. And they don't just teach you the mechanics behind it, how to do sound and make sure that the levels are right and the lighting's perfect. They teach you how to monetize it. That is a huge gift for a city where 25% of the population is below the poverty line. Huge gift. And it's funded in part by the city and in part by private donors. And they're not limited just to that knowledge set. They're also teaching people about music production, culinary arts, things that you would typically have to pay for in a community college or a trade school. They're doing it for free. There's a great value to that in a city. And it doesn't cost a lot of money to put a program like that together.
Well, I think we can move into this like from a work standpoint then, because that's what we're talking about here is, okay, from an employment standpoint and the opportunities that could be presented within a specific location, a specific city. Before we do, there was one thought that I had with, there was a guy that moved from San Francisco, moved overseas to Portugal, and had a chat with him. It's probably going about 4 or 5 years ago now. And just asked him the question. I said, does it feel like home? And he said, feels like home for now.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's such a lightness that can come with that, of not needing to have it all figured out, because things are going to change. And as change continues to ramp up, there's going to be different factors that are important to you at one stage. And there's going to be other times where it's more important, something else is going to be more important. And so having that flexibility, I guess, is important. So I'm a massive believer that your environment matters. And it's like, especially your home, but going across into your city as well, or the location, that your environment really matters. It enables us to perform at certain levels. It enables us to feel good about ourselves, to feel healthy, to feel well, to feel a sense of belonging. Yeah. It can happen as well, not just with people, but with the actual environment itself.
I can tell you unequivocally that your zip code is the greatest predictor of your success in life.
Right.
Better than anything else. Your zip code is the greatest predictor of your success, not just your financial success, your health and well-being too.
Why is that?
It's a good question. There's a multitude of factors that go into it. Typically higher performing zip codes have greater access to education. They're wealthier. They've got greater access to healthcare. Like those things exist within a zip code. But literally, if you're born into one of those places, your trajectory is not entirely predetermined, but you are well ahead of the rest of the population as a result. There are parts of this country where when you're born, you're only expected to live until you're like in your mid 50s. There are other parts of this country where you're born, you're expected to live into your late 90s. That's a 40-year difference. Pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And it's based on where you're born.
What are some things then? I've got a question in here. Let's say I'm born into a zip code that's not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
What can I be doing to be not a statistic?
Oh, that's a different question for a different guest. I think about my hometown, Pittsburgh, and I think about when that steel industry collapsed. And I think about the different paths that people took out of Pittsburgh, or the different paths they took when that singular event happened. Some people left altogether. They realized they couldn't find prosperity in Pittsburgh. They moved elsewhere across the country. Some people had success in that new place. Other people failed. I saw that in my own family. You could pivot industries. My father is a great example of this. He pivoted out of a trade like steelmaking and into healthcare and became a doctor and is wildly successful as a result. My mother, her parents were a teacher and an elevator installer. She went into education as well. Other parts of the family that stayed and didn't pivot, many of them are dead now. They died because of drug overdoses. They died because of non-communicable diseases, obesity, heart disease, et cetera, because they no longer had that sense of belonging and being and purpose anymore. They fell through the cracks and they became statistics. So we have a lot of license to change things. My father's story, I think, is one of those where he had nothing growing up. And his life could have very easily gone towards the bad, but it went towards the good instead. My mother was part of that reason, getting him to go to college. But so much of it was him driving himself. Not everyone can be a doctor, though. Not everyone can be a chief of industry. Not everyone can run a financial institution. I understand that. But in this country, there are still so many of those pathways to get there. So what do? You take every opportunity that you have when presented. Don't shy away from a single one. And when you've decided what your path is or your North Star that you're sailing towards, you pivot accordingly to get to that. I think that's advice we should all be taking. In my own career, it's been that way. I knew I wasn't happy in my job. I pivoted away from it, actually took a huge jump, a huge leap away from it into doing my own thing. And I couldn't be happier now.
Yeah.
But the right stars need to align to get to that point too.
There's adaptability and responsibility in there.
There's
Both of those,
responsibility.
Isn't
There's resources.
Yeah.
What was I saving? Did I have the right things put aside? All of those pieces come into play.
Yeah.
And everyone's story is different.
Yeah.
But of the people that came from nothing that have achieved success, their pathways, or at least what they had to do to get there, is very similar. It's a lot of hard decisions. It's about taking opportunities when they present themselves. And honestly, there's a lot of luck that gets thrown into it too. We discount luck and the ability to be seen by somebody who can take you and move you forward to your next opportunity. For me, I would say that my leap happened largely because of a relationship I developed with the CEO of one of our biggest newspapers in the country. And we just happened to meet. And he became, a real mentor to me and said, you should be doing this. And I took the leap. I got a big book deal as a result. And I am forever changed because of it. But if I hadn't been in the room, if I hadn't taken that meeting, if I hadn't said yes, I don't think I'd be where I am right now.
Yeah, it reminds me of what is the quote? The harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yeah,
because you're putting yourself into those positions. It doesn't mean that you are going to get lucky or you're not, but it increases the likelihood that there are going to be opportunities, or you're going to just randomly bump into the CEO of a massive organization, for example. And
there's the story of Aristotle and Onassis. Somebody asked him once, what would you do if you lost everything tomorrow? And he said, I would go and find where the rich people are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd hang out in those rooms or adjacent to those rooms because those are where the decisions are made. Those are where the opportunities surface themselves, because there is a sorting mechanism that happens all the time within wealth and opportunity that people don't pay attention to, I think, nearly enough. Folks think that if you simply work hard and play by the rules, you're going to get ahead. And yes, you have to work hard and play by the rules, but you also have to be looking for every single opportunity that exists out there. And so much of it is just showing up.
Yeah.
I know that sounds redundant and probably a little silly, but just showing up, just being in the room is essential for success.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It reminds me, there's a story I heard years ago, and I'm not sure if this is a real story or if it's simply a story to prove a point, but there was identical twins, abusive father. They got separated as children, taken away because of what had happened within the family. Years and years later, they interview the two. One twin has turned into an alcoholic, just like his father. Abusive, and they asked him, why did you end up this way? And he said, well, with a father like that, what do you expect? And they went and interviewed the other twin, and now has a family and has a job and has a career and has these pieces in his life, and life's going really well. And he said, well, how did you end up this way? What was the reason you end up this way? He said, with a father like that, what do you expect?
A lot of perspective.
Yeah. There's a perspective. There's ownership in there of, okay, I'm going to choose my path rather than have the path chosen for me. And that goes for, like, I grew up on a very small part of like a farm in outback Australia, and it's like we got 2,500 people in the town. I had 11 people in my graduating class, and it's like a 9-hour drive away from the city. So we're a long way from any. And there were so many opportunities that the kids got in the city that we didn't get.
Sure.
Right. And I'm very optimistic about what folks who are in places and locations that might not have the same opportunities, that ideally that continues to narrow in the gap because of access to technology and areas where if you've got responsibility and you go, you know what, I'm going to do this, then regardless of what's going on, I'm going to achieve that.
Yeah. I mean, kids always need to see what the possibility is.
Yeah.
That gives them at least hope for what they can achieve. The question is, and I think this has been a recurring challenge. I'm not sure how we want to frame that exactly word-wise, but for kids for the past 40 years, because they look up and they see success being a sports player. They look up now and they see success being a YouTube star. And, for young people, really, majority of like young Gen Zs and early alphas, the vast majority of them think they want to be creators when they grow up. Well, creators are great. I'm one, you're one, but we're not making anything. There's still quite a bit of opportunity in making things and doing very unglamorous work. Some of the wealthiest people in America right now are doing jobs that you would never consider. They're running laundromats. They're doing trash removal. They're doing these tough jobs, and they're high revenue jobs as well.
Yeah, there's good money in that because the recurring nature of some of those things.
I mean, I always kind of chuckle at the Midwest millionaire miracle. There are millionaires everywhere in the Midwest. And the Midwest, these are smaller manufacturers, many of them, but they've built these mini empires. We don't hear about them at all. The biggest story I think that ran about this kind of Midwest millionaire kind of phenomenon was in the Wall Street Journal, and that was like 18 months ago. And that was it. But nobody really covers it. So like these kids today, God, I sound like my grandparents. These kids today.
Back in my day,
get off my yard. These kids today, they don't have the kind of, oh, that's the guy I want to be. That's the woman I want to be. They don't see that. So they see these aspirational people, these big stars on social media, and they say, that's what I want to be. That's attainable for me. My nephews are the same way. I mean, they've got their own goals and they're going to be fine because they're in a great zip, but they say they want to be creators. Now they'll grow out of that.
Yeah.
But that's what they want. They want to speak because that's what they see aspirationally as a pathway to success.
Well, I guess I think about me growing up and yeah, okay, what do you want to be when you grow up? And there are these things that you look at and go, oh yeah, I want to be this or I want to be that.
Yeah. Well, we didn't have social media back then.
Exactly.
And and you know, sports was a big thing, but not for like where I was growing up. Like sports wasn't a pathway for it. But if you looked at marginalized communities, specifically Black communities in this country, sports was the way to get ahead. The pathways, I think, still exist for people to do great things. I just wish we'd show the pathways to success more clearly. You know, I think about the fact that in this country in particular, but I think we can say this about most of the West, is that for about a 50-year period or so, we told kids, you go to college, you get a college degree. That's your pathway to success. Meanwhile, you can go to the Union of Electrical Workers, Brotherhood of Electrical Workers in Pittsburgh, a union. They will teach you how to become an electrician for free. You will do an apprenticeship for free. You will come out, you'll make $80,000 a year in Pittsburgh. That is almost 3x what a social worker makes coming out of college and in $100,000 or more debt. Kids don't know this exists, and we have pushed them in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, trades are like the number one demand job right now, and they're one of the jobs that is very hard to automate.
It'd be one of the last things to automate, I think, like with some, especially some of those skill sets, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like we're just not there yet. The things that are getting automated for the most part are these very redundant tasks. And, you know, somebody asked me the other day, you know, Brad, what do you think about this white collar kind of avalanche of AI taking these jobs? And I'm like, AI is not taking your job. AI is not taking your job. That's the thing I say all the time. AI is taking redundancies out of your job.
Yeah.
So if you have 20% of your day that you spend on administrative tasks, which I think is pretty normal for folks, just the general BS that you have to deal with, and you've got a team of 5 people, well, you don't need 5 people anymore. You need 4 because you lob off 20%. That's where the reckoning comes. It's not for the knowledge worker. It's for the redundant tasks that are no longer needed within that person. That's the way I think people should be looking at this more clearly. Your skills as a knowledge worker become all the more important. The BS work of administrative tasks that you have to do, less so. Smart people will get ahead during this period.
Yeah. How should we be thinking about from a work standpoint then? And this goes for those 5 key categories as well as, so let's go the person who's employed now. Maybe they're thinking about from a AI standpoint and those tasks that are being automated. How do we go about thinking from a work standpoint when it comes to these key areas?
It's difficult looking at all 5 of them from a worker perspective.
Which ones are important then when it comes to a worker perspective?
The number one is automation. There's no question about that,
right,
because it's the one question that nobody has fully answered at this point. It's also something that we're in the middle of right now. We're in the middle of the disruption before the pain actually occurs. So typically when there's any kind of general leap forward in technology, we have a pain period, and then it's followed by a pleasure period. The pain period happens when the jobs of the old world go away, or they're redesigned in such a way that you don't fit into that job anymore. And let me put this into like some context that I think you'll get, and I certainly hope the people who watch this get. When is the last time you thought about a lamplighter?
A lamplighter?
A lamplighter.
I don't even know what a lamplighter is.
A lamplighter was a gentleman in the Victorian period that would go around the city every night
light the lamps up.
And light the gas lamps that kept the city lights on.
Yeah.
We've never even thought of what a lamp. We don't even know what a lamplighter is.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't exist anymore, because electricity took care of that. You don't need the lamplighter anymore. When's the last time you thought about somebody who makes horse saddles? You don't, because that's not a thing anymore. When every technology changes, there's a leap. Pain, pleasure. Old jobs go away, new jobs come online. Mechanics did not exist when there were horse-drawn carriages. They did not exist. And then they became one of the big employment opportunities in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. They're still good paying jobs. This time is no different. Entire new jobs will come with this. but it will take time for them to emerge.
What's the pain period, do you think? Do you have any idea?
And it's suck for a while.
Is there a number of years you think it's going to be? And then is it going to, from an unemployment standpoint, because there is those efficiencies that occur?
Yeah.
Would make sense that the population isn't going to necessarily decrease enough to offset from an automation standpoint.
No,
So
I can't put a solid year on it.
Yeah.
And I say we probably have at least 5 years of pain. It could be longer. The challenge with the technological developments that we're going through right now is that they're so fast. The question is whether or not people can respond in kind to the new world. That's the big question. And what kind of innovation will come as a result? Because innovation will bubble up from the individual, not necessarily the institution. I think there are probably quite a few thinkers that would agree with me on this, is that AI could mint dozens, hundreds, thousands of millionaires because it'll make it a lot easier to start up and run a company right from your home. You won't necessarily need to take on a lot of risk to get a lot of reward. I was asked yesterday, do I think it'll concentrate wealth? It will in the short term. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that will make the very untenable situation that we have now.
what does it mean for social cohesion? One of the
Well,
key
I actually think it
areas,
actually pulls people together. That's the
You think
irony.
so? How so?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How?
Because there's a common enemy. People love a common enemy.
And the common enemy being
Tech.
okay?
Tech. And the gentlemen, for the most part, who lead tech have made themselves the perfect foils. The perfect foils. Unconstrained wealth, unconstrained power, seemingly no interest in the common man. They're the perfect foil. Occasionally, if you're a student of history, and I am, and I use history a lot in my Foresight practice because history is a great predictor of what's coming. History doesn't repeat itself. It rhymes. Mark Twain said this. And if you look at populist movements come start and then stop. They're kind of fits and spurts. But populism has to be delivered by a populist. Populism can't just be sold to the population. There actually needs to be something behind it. People have argued for the past decade, we're in a populist moment in the United States. We're not.
What's a populist moment?
Well, there's two kinds.
Okay.
There's the autocratic fascist one, and there's kind of the Great Deal one, the New Deal one. So you could be in a very Franklin Delano Roosevelt perspective, or you could be in more of like an Adolf Hitler kind of perspective. At the same time, you've got basically good and evil, but at their core, they were about solving for people's problems. No one in government is solving for people's problems right now, really in an effective way. I'm talking about the United States.
Right.
No one is really solving for people's problems, so the anger is still brewing underneath. This has the greatest potential right now to give rise to a new deal, a new type of populism. The question is whether or not people get past their polarization and focus on the quote unquote the common enemy, the common problem, versus these kind of weird culture war things that they easily fixate on.
I wonder, because when it comes to different cognitive biases and different levels of division as well, we're talking America, but this goes for worldwide as well, that things like social is reinforcing those biases, right? It gives us what we want to experience. So
Yeah.
in what world does that subside, if you will, because there is a greater enemy in this way, being tech? And I think about it when you were sharing of like every alien movie that there is, right? It's like, there's all kinds of division, and then all of a sudden there's something coming out of the sky.
We love a good
It's like,
enemy.
let's go together, right? Let's get them.
We love a singular enemy. We love it. We love it. We love a foil. We love somebody to fight against, but it has to be kind of singular. And, in the 1920s, in the 1930s, following the stock market collapse and the Great Depression, there was a clear enemy, and it was men with money. It were these effectively oligarchs at the time, people like the Rockefellers and the like, who had consolidated wealth and power, and the power of government finally gave way to the power of the people. And that's where you saw the regulatory state really come into play in force. That's where you saw a rebalancing of the tax system to be progressive, not like the one we have now. Businesses and individuals that made a lot of money paid a lot more in taxes. And what that did is that created a period of great expansion. In part, wasn't the only reason, created a period of expansion for the United States.
And the big structural changes we're talking about.
Yeah. But there's been a kind of a very slow and steady erosion to it. It's like the frog in the pot. People haven't noticed that, I think until now, just like the frog in the pot, when the water gets too hot, it's too late, that the rich have become so rich. And now the rich are covering the economy effectively right now. If the rich weren't spending, the entire economy would collapse. You talk to investment bankers about, as I did last year, how's 2026 look? Is it going to be good or bad? I was feeling a little anxious. And the consistent answer was, notwithstanding like a black swan event, and we don't know if Iran is a black swan event yet or not, by the way, notwithstanding a black swan event, most people can expect their investments to grow by 15%. That's unheard of. And it's like the second year in a row that's going to happen. And it's very simple. Deregulation, artificial intelligence, and a lot of money moving into the market.
So how should we then, let's move to those that are running companies, whether they're leading or they own the companies. Maybe built into this as well is those from an investment standpoint, those thinking about, okay, where am I putting my money, or where am I putting my people or business when it comes to the index that was released? How should people be thinking about where they go?
I think for individuals and businesses, there are some parallels.
Yeah.
So there was a model that many followed, I would say now for at least the past 2 decades. In reality, it might push to 4, where people followed price. So if you wanted affordability, you left the Northeast or the Midwest and you moved south. Cheaper homes, lower taxes. If you're a business, you did the same thing. Moved south because there were lower regulations, fewer unions, lower taxes.
Right.
It was a good deal. With the shifts in risk in particular, especially around insurance, that math is starting to change. So it's not a clear-cut decision, as clear of a cut decision as it was before, because there are new risks that didn't exist there before. So the movement of Citadel to Miami, I think, is a good case in point. He wants to move his company there. That's his choice. But he's moving away from a city that has really good social cohesion, really good governance, to a place that doesn't have great environment in terms of the weather and the risk associated with having a headquarters there. But again, he's made that decision. He's chosen to do that. It's his company. It's his prerogative. If I were a business owner, I would hope I'd be thinking longer term about what my needs are versus, I'm just going to move to a low tax state.
Right.
I think that is really reductive thinking and kind of backwards. You need to be thinking about what your company's longer term needs are past a 5-year horizon, because it costs a lot to move a company.
Yeah.
It also costs a lot to keep a company in a place that's no longer working for you. It's expensive if you can't find the right people. If your insurance prices are going up faster than you can keep up. It's expensive to keep land that doesn't work for your footprint anymore. All of these things factor in. But one of the things that we found with corporate leaders in particular is that they're thinking about these things as silos, just like local leaders do. Your risk officer is thinking about extreme weather and the insurance costs. Your HR person is thinking about people. Are there enough of the right people, of the right skill sets here to do the jobs? Your operations person might be thinking through a different lens, like, is the government kind of working in our favor in a regulatory sense? But they don't necessarily come together on those issues the way they should. They're not thinking it's holistically on them as possible. And it's almost like it's a secondary thought of, do we open up a place in X, Y, or Z? It's not like a board level decision that really kind of centers around the overall governance of the company. And I think we might have to move to that for some employers. I do think that there are some employers that are, I think tech has been pretty good at this, on the decentralization of the HQ model.
Right.
So big tech in particular has satellite offices everywhere across the country right now. They're going to where the talent is. So they're going to where the population exists for talent. So Google is a perfect example of this. Google has offices in Ann Arbor, in Pittsburgh, down here in Austin. I think they're in New York City as well, a handful of other cities. But their headquarters is out west in California. This is a decentralized approach to managing risk and managing what the future is as it relates to risk and how we look at the geography of prosperity. What it does for the employees is actually kind of cool too, because you no longer have to move to California for your big tech job, where you're going to live in a place that has a higher extreme weather risk, for at least for wildfires, and a really high cost of living, like insanely high cost of living. Instead, you can move to a place like Pittsburgh and pay a fraction of the amount in terms of your housing costs and the like, and have as good or better life. So you're giving a little bit of license to the employee as well. And that's an added benefit, I think, for businesses and employers to do for their people. We also have this other piece now that I don't think businesses have fully understood. I think because a lot of corporate leaders are still pushing against it. But we're about a very durable norm now of 10% of the labor pool working in fully remote jobs now. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people. And when you add in people who are in hybrid work schemes, that's more than a third of the working population. That's a lot of people. So there's a decoupling happening of people from place, from work, in a way that we've never experienced before. So people who are still driven by price are looking at cities that can allow them to have that 3-bedroom home at a fraction of what it would cost in a big city. That's why you've seen, I think, really interesting development up the Hudson River Valley in New York, a real interest in that, because people are in these hybrid work environments. They can take the train in an hour and a half, a couple of days a week. They couldn't do it every day, but they only go into the office 2 days a week. This is great for them. Better schools, better life, all that fun stuff. You're also seeing that there are some cities that are really leaning into this new norm too. Cities used to really go after corporates for their long-term development strategy. We've all heard about the Amazon example, where they went across the country and some insane number, I think 283, I think, different municipalities or state governments, regional governments bid for Amazon's HQ2. Wow. And they narrowed it down to 10, and then it got down between DC and New York. And these incredible incentives went out from both cities. Move here, move here, move here. The New York project obviously got derailed for cultural, political reasons, but they did put down roots in Arlington, Virginia, just outside of DC, got tax financing, infrastructure promises, very expensive for Arlington, Virginia. And Amazon has never made the promise of the number of jobs they were going to bring, the number of office, and they rarely do. But now you can go after people. So if you're able to present your city as a people-first city, you can pull in remote talent. And one of the cities that's done a really remarkably good job at this is Tulsa, Oklahoma. And they launched a project in 2018 with a Kaiser Family Foundation grant that gave individuals $10,000 to move to Tulsa, Oklahoma as remote workers. It's called Tulsa Remote. The people that have moved there, 80% stay after the first year, 50% stay after the 5-year mark. Now, what does that mean for a city like Tulsa? Well, it doesn't change their population dramatically, but it does stabilize it a bit. And what does it do for their economy? Well, people who are in remote jobs don't necessarily stay in remote jobs forever, but they're going to want to stay in their home. So you see this knock-on effect of people actually starting businesses now that came on the remote worker program in Tulsa, because the right environment exists in Tulsa.
They found home there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're talking about all types of businesses too. We're talking about this adorable little bakery that was opened just after COVID by the spouse of a remote worker. Brick and mortar, empty building, now fully occupied, tax paying, really contributing back to the community. Two, the companies that are building themselves as remote companies. One of them that I met when I was there is a AI logistics company. Guy had a vision. Tulsa sits in a really interesting corridor for trade across the country for freight in between Bentonville, Arkansas, and Oklahoma City and everywhere else around. They're building this company from scratch there. These guys are XAI alums. They would have had to do this in California before. Now they can do it in Tulsa. One of the keys to getting these people, though, is belonging. It's not just the money. It's not just the cost. People want to live in a community now. They're more desperate.
That's that social cohesion we're talking
that's the
about.
social cohesion.
Yeah.
People are absolutely desperate for community right now. They're desperate for belonging because it feels so disconnected, the world that we're in. And we don't measure belonging well. We talk about isolation a lot, which is what happens when there isn't belonging.
Right.
But we don't talk about the belonging piece. And those cities that are working towards that are going to be a lot better at recruiting and retaining talent.
And the retaining part is important because
Huge.
if you can recruit someone all you like, but if there's not that level of I feel like I do belong here, it's just a matter of time before going somewhere else.
Let's close the circle. Okay, let's close the circle here. Because our population is going to plateau and go into reverse at some point in the next 10 years, if we stay on our current trajectory of low births, low immigration, people become the number one thing. Retention becomes the number one thing for a city and a company. Yeah. So yes, artificial intelligence, automation, these Waymos that zip around here on the streets, they're going to take up some of the slack from a decline in population, but people become a lot more important when there are fewer of them around. A lot more important. And it's not just your workers. This is such an important part of this. It's not just your workers, it's also your customers. So we started treating, not we, I'm not going to include myself in this. Corporations started treating customers as consumers sometime in the past 20 years. We're going to put it out there. You're going to buy it whether you like it or not. Quality slipped consistently across the board on basically every product we consume, whether it's going into our bodies, onto our bodies, or over our heads, or under our tuchuses. Everything's cheaper now than it used to be because we simply became consumers. And as a result, the experience of becoming a customer went away. Like there is no customer service anymore. You get thrown into an AI system. I think that there's going to be real competition for customers again because we're going to have a limited supply of people to buy product and service. So I think businesses are going to have to pivot back towards more of a customer service.
Actually caring.
Actually caring about who's buying their stuff.
Yeah. I had Tony Guerreri, a good friend of mine, who was on the show recently and runs a framing company, very successful, and a huge focus on culture. And a huge component of that when most things are commoditized is how you're making the customer feel.
Yeah.
Do they feel valued? Do they feel important? And it's a hugely important piece. What would you say is the vision that you have then for Geography of Prosperity? Where does this go from here?
At least domestically, we've committed to doing this for the next 3 to 5 years. Yep. It's important to get a long-term look at data, and maybe this becomes the thing people use. We know cities are interested already. We're getting calls about it from mayors wanting to know how it applies to them. Businesses are starting to pick up the phone as well, asking how does this apply to my site selection? You'd be surprised how many companies go through site selection processes each year. It's a lot. Very curious about how this applies. And then I think with meeting with Realtor.com yesterday, I think that the real estate industry is trying to figure this out too. What does this really mean for the long-term success, not just of builders, but also real estate sellers, agents, and then the whole financing industry behind it too. And that's a whole other conversation for a whole other day. I think this thing grows over time domestically. Long-term, can it grow globally? And the answer is a definitive yes. As long as the data exists, the Geography of Prosperity Index can be applied to any country that has similar data. Where do you find similar data in the world? Well, virtually every Commonwealth country, those that once existed under the British Crown, with maybe the exception of India, doesn't have as great of data collection as the rest, but certainly Canada, certainly the UK, certainly Ireland, Australia, New Zealand. Japan and Korea, 100%, 100%, and the vast majority of Europe, but definitely every country in Western Europe can do this and apply these models there. In a increasingly global world, increasingly mobile world, where we can go from point A to point B. Your friend in Portugal is case in point. Wouldn't it be interesting to say, I want to look at cities with X number population across the world rather than just across the country. I want to look at cities that really excel at social cohesion and look not just at the cities in the United States, but also the cities in Germany, and see if there is more that I can take into that decision-making process as an individual and maybe also as a business leader. Having that is our gift, and the way you use it, we can help with that.
Yeah, I love it. Great stuff, man. Well, hey, we have a rapid fire segment on the show here. You ready for this?
I hope so.
What's your number one value and why?
It's always curiosity. It is the single greatest tool in your tool chest if you have it, especially as we go through this AI transformation right now. You have to be curious. You have to ask questions.
Love that. What's a belief that shaped who you've become, whether it be a belief about yourself, about others, about the world?
Genuinely, I believe that most people are good people. And in a hyper-partisan period for our nation and our world, if you lead with understanding first that people are inherently good and that they want the same things that you do at the end of the day, it's much easier to find commonality.
So good. Love that. What about a habit, routine, or ritual? What's a habit, routine, or ritual that you can't live without?
I talked earlier about living in gray space. Like, I don't believe in right and wrong. I think that there is obviously a lot of gray. So not right and wrong. There are right and wrong things. There is not a right answer to every question that's put out there. And I think that the answer sometimes sits in the middle. So my practice is constantly to sit with two things in my head. Sometimes two extremes, to find what commonality there is and what a solution could be as a result.
So contradictory pieces usually?
Yeah, throw two things in your head and let them fight it out.
Yeah.
Not many people can do that. I'm not saying that I'm exceptional. It's hard, and it's a hard practice, but it is a worthwhile one. And I think if more of us challenge ourselves with living with those two truths, as crazy as they may be, we'd have a lot more empathy to other people's ideas.
I think practicing that internally, I haven't thought about it in that way of, okay, practice internally. I'm a big believer in having that as a practice externally as well, of being able to have a conversation and sit down with someone that you disagree with and just have a real conversation, not for the purpose of proving that you're right, but for the purpose of seeking to understand.
Yeah.
Because it's in through that you might still not agree with that person's point of view, for example, but you now have more data available to you to understand, okay, yeah, I can see why they do that, and a little bit more of understanding, a little bit more perspective. But yeah, doing that internally, I think makes a lot of sense as well. So love that.
You got to push yourself.
Yeah. Dude, really good conversation. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Where can people go find out? Whether it's to download the index or find out more about the Geography of Prosperity or anything else? Yeah,
I think if you want to download the index, take a look at it. It's a fully interactive online tool at geographyofprosperity.com.
Yep.
If you want to learn more about me, I'm at bradleyschurman.com and bradley.schurman on Instagram.
Awesome. Thanks for coming in, man.
Thank you.
Awesome. And for those tuning in, we'll have everything that was mentioned linked in the show notes at cameronatlas.com/podcast. We have some great new guests coming up, so make sure you hit that follow button, leave a comment, and until next time, go and write the next line in your story. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next episode here on The Edge of Possible.